far as I know, he introduced jazz chords into rock and roll. You know, it was a great contrast between our garage band thumping punk guitar playing and Brian's cushiony, like jazz vocal harmonies. So that's what created such a unique sound. There was nothing like it before that, I don't think. You know, we all combined the elements of rock and roll and jazz.
Say, fellas, a lot of vocal groups have some pretty strange names. How'd you come about deciding to call yourself the Freshmen?
Well, we chose the name while we were in college in Indiana.
Well, we were freshmen at the time.
Oh, I get it. You better get to singing something. What are you going to sing tonight?
Well, why don't we do the tune we rehearsed?
It's a good idea. We'd be in a lot of trouble otherwise. Go, boy, go.
I wonder why you keep me waiting, Charmaine, my Charmaine.
A key feature of Wilson's early vocal arrangements was his keen ear for complex, jazz-inspired harmony, a dimension that was foreign to rock and roll of the period. It came to Brian through his unorthodox interest in the Four Freshmen, a vocal group that had been active since the late 1940s and had achieved some popular success on the Capitol label during the 50s.
A jazz harmony group, actually from Los Angeles, not far from where Brian lived. He heard their music coming out of his mom's car's radio in the early 50s and begged her to take him into a record store so he could listen to more. And you can hear their influence all over his vocal arrangements. And they were a very just kind of jazz pop of the early 50s and beyond. Four guys in sweaters, looking extremely clean cut and kind of nerdy, singing this very sweet and romantic music. I think a lot of adolescents would shy away from that, but there was also this side of him that was drawn to this much more complicated, much more melodically and harmonically challenging music that came with this kind of geeky overlay, which didn't bother him in the least.
There are a lot of aspects of the influence of the Four Freshmen. Part of it is just the songs. The Four Freshmen albums have really great songs on them by classic American composers, Gershwin, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, all the greats. And then there's just the vocal style, especially the high tenor Bob Flanagan. Brian once said that Bob Flanagan taught him to sing. And so he would work out all these parts on the piano and sing along with the records. That became a huge part of the sound that he created when he made the Beach Boys.
Without you, it's a blue world alone. My days and nights that once were filled with heaven, with you away, how empty they have grown. It's a blue world.
These were jazz players and jazz singers, see, so they were singing the intervals that you heard from the swing band days, you know, that kind of thing, which later formed the jazz, the bebop jazz and everything. So I'd say that from the way that he listened to music, then he picked out certain sounds, you know, that he liked.
My heart and I, we're all an indigo hue.
The Four Freshmen would sing chords like, boom, these kind of intervals, you know, it's not just boom, 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 not just that, but you know, those kind of intervals. You get those from jazz chords. You don't get them from rock and roll chords. So he heard that, and I believe it influenced him in the way that he wrote his songs so that he could write parts and everything. He never changed his bass lines, but he changed a lot of other parts. But so he wrote from that bottom end, you know, up. From the bottom up, he heard spatial notes, you know, and so he assigned certain instruments to play those notes.
In 1961, as Brian continued to experiment with his distinctive blend of surf guitar, rock and roll, and complex harmony, the band formalized their act, initially calling themselves the Pendletones. While a consistent lyrical theme remained elusive, Dennis Wilson, an enthusiastic participant in the mushrooming surf scene, suggested that they write about the phenomenon that was capturing the imaginations of teenagers across LA. The result was an agreement with a local label for the release of the group's debut single, Surfin.
There are fascinating tapes, and you can hear Brian just coaching his brothers and badgering them on and you know, getting them to sing it exactly the way he wants it sung. And even at that early point, he is very tuned in to the fact that the background vocals not only had to be in tune, but had to sound exciting. He wanted the guys to sound excited when they were going, surfing, surfing. You know, you had to kind of project some emotion into it.
It comes in too strong, my voice. I don't care
Look, who's Bob?
Me.
Now you guys are gonna do. Okay.
Shut up. It's recording here. We're wasting my precious tape. Now, here we go. Slow it. Now, this time let's sing it out naturally. Don't hold back. See, if you have to sing too loud, we'll step back. This is about the right balance, isn't it?
Surfing.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but blend.
A little closer, fellas. Come on. Little
Try to
closer.
blend.
Right there.
And get the words exactly together. Hey, let's go. Surfing, surfing. Keep down real soft. See how good we can do it. Surfing, louder, surfing.
Oh, pretty good idea.
Surfin was done with the bare minimum. As a matter of fact, Brian used his finger to hit the snare drum. Al played the upright bass, and Carl actually was playing an electric hollow body guitar, but it was unplugged. So he just had a microphone on it. And the background vocals, and that was it. And I would say that was more representative of folk music, actually. I wouldn't say that was surf music.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me now. Surfing is the only life, the only way for me now. Surf with me.
It made an impact in Los Angeles. It sold 50,000 copies. It got them as high as #2 on the local single charts in LA and Southern California, and nationally as high as 75 on the Billboard charts, which is nothing to sneeze at. It helped propel them to the point where Murray could walk into the Capitol Tower in Hollywood and say, I got a band for you to sign.
The local success of Surfin was sufficient to persuade Murray Wilson, the brothers' father and erstwhile band manager, to finance demo sessions at World Pacific in early '62. Brian had been energetically composing material, extending his activity to a new writing partnership with aspiring musician Gary Usher, and compiling an ever-growing repertoire of songs with which to launch the group.
Brian was focused. He would get an idea, and he would fully develop it in his mind from beginning to end, and he could see the whole picture, and he would immediately act upon it. This is my opinion of what Brian's genius was. It was his ability to conceive a song, put it together in his head, act on it immediately, whether it be in the middle of the night or in the morning, whenever. He would act on it immediately and see it through from beginning to end. And it was really quite something to watch. Our demos were done with the electric guitars. That was something that wasn't really incorporated in the beginning stages of the Beach Boys. With Al Jardine's influence, it was leaning towards folk music, like the Kingston Trio. They were big at the time, and so people were trying to emulate that. However, Brian really perked up when he heard Carl and I doing electric guitars and the driving rhythm. And I think that really had a lot to do with us breaking so big, just because of the unique sound of electric guitars and the jazz vocal harmonies.